it's a thing to be quite cautious about, psychic development. It's not blasé. Anyone who told me it was easy, I'd know they weren't reliable. I'd make that dogmatic statement. You've got your focus has got to be extremely intense. You need to know that it's outside of you, not inside of you. You need to know. If you don't know, then you can say you don't know. And by the way, there's nothing wrong with saying, look, this came to me, and I had the feeling of Jesus around me when it came to me, and I think it's beautiful, and leave it at that, without claiming I am a channel for Jesus. I mean, no one is going to say that you couldn't have the presence of Jesus around you. That could happen to anybody who had the right intent. But that's a very different thing from being a reliable, accurate channel for the Master Jesus, as I would call him, as was Dr. King, who entered this samadhic trance.
The Spiritual Freedom Show with Richard Lawrence, where politics is not the answer, materialism counts for nothing, and spirituality will set you free.
Richard, welcome.
Hi, Darren.
So I've got a great question that came through earlier this week, and I wanted to share with you because I think it really gets to the heart of some of the teachings that we can share here. So this person writes as follows: "This is an extract from a transcript from a lady who is said to channel Jesus, the Ascended Master." That's how they refer to him. "I received the books from Jesus in the same way that Helen Schuckman received A Course in Miracles, which is also said to be dictated by Jesus. Many others have also received their writings this way, including St. Teresa of Avila, St. Hildegard of Bingen, Richard Bach, and Neil Donald Walsh. This method of receiving information is called conscious channeling. It's a process of hearing words mentally and writing them down as they are heard without any thought. I can receive this communication anywhere. I don't need to be in a meditative or trance state. All that's necessary is that I don't think. When I'm receiving this dictation, it's as if Jesus is sitting in a chair next to me speaking the words, except that those words are heard mentally." So then this person writing to us says, "My question is, why the need for Dr. King to train in yoga 8 hours a day for 10 years and achieve a dangerous trance state in order to receive transmissions from Jesus, when Jesus has, allegedly, according to these other claims, simply spoken through conscious channeling?"
Yeah, well, there's a great question, and I don't wish to offend the person, but I'm going to have to be very, very honest here.
No, yeah, direct. That's what we need,
And first of all, the core, the source really for the Spiritual Freedom Show, the 9 freedoms. This was a result of Dr. King entering samadhic trance, and it is a trance. It's something I've had a taste of myself. That trance, not doing this, of course, or anything near it, and I know it's real and it does exist. And I've done channeling for, well, over 30 years now. And so I have a lot of experience in this area. And quite frankly, that person doesn't know how to channel. I have to put it down, I would like to be gentle about it, but on the other hand, one's got to be honest about it. If you do what that person said, which is just stop thinking, and then whatever comes to you, whatever you hear, I think he said, or whatever words, no, I think he said even not you hear, what words come to you, and you write them down, it's very likely to be your subconscious mind that you're channeling, your own subconscious mind. It's possible you could channel if you did unknowingly slip into some kind of, I'm going to call it a vacant trance. Dr. King might call it a negative trance. Actually channel an imposter.
So someone pretending
who isn't Jesus, but is deliberately pretending to be Jesus, who's on the other realms, who isn't a very good person at all, who's either just trying to have a laugh, as they see it, or even cause confusion. Or even just has a very big ego and is very misguided, and it's the best way they can get through. By the way, there's a lot of people who think they're having visions of, let's just say, Virgin Mary, and think the Virgin Mary is bringing miracles in their life. I'm not, and she's a great lady. I'm not in any way disparaging the Virgin Mary. That'd be a stupid thing and a wrong thing to do. But it isn't necessarily the Virgin Mary.
Oh, what would you say?
It might be because they might be of a Catholic persuasion, where say, let's just give an example, an angel of mercy, I think they used to call them, certain type of nurse who wears a certain kind of dress over their head and some veil and what have you. They could think it's the Virgin. They could assume it's the Virgin Mary because of their mode of worship. It could be a guide. It could be a good guide, a helpful guide. What we need, one book I thought of writing, Darren, at one time was A Good Guide.
Yeah.
Because,
That's the Richard Lawrence title.
People need help with that. Yeah. But that of itself, and even I've talked to Dr. King about the particular case of the Virgin Mary, actually, doesn't mean it's not a good thing, but just because of their particular persuasion, they think it is. If they were of a Hindu persuasion and they had a vision, they might think it was Vishnu. Might not be Vishnu, but because of the... So lots of things go on with the subconscious mind. They could be anything from just getting a guide wrong. When I first started channeling, and this would be now more like 40 years ago, I did make some mistakes myself. I thought some entities were somebody they weren't.
Oh, misidentifying someone.
Misidentified. Okay. I mean, I'll tell you the mistake I made, because it's an interesting example. I had a message from a guide called Saint Rock, who was a great healer, actually. And I thought, when the name Rock came to me, I thought, Rock, I am the Rock, St. Peter. And I was very interested indeed, and still am, in St. Peter. And I thought, okay. And it wasn't St. Peter. As a matter of fact, Dr. King helped me with this. So I was lucky to have, a teacher to do. And I learned a massive lesson. And I actually thought of giving up. And he said, no, don't give up. It just went wrong with the guides. Carry on. And I did carry on. Yeah. But I'm extremely careful now. So what I'd say, he's named a few people there, writers, and some of them quite successful, and a saint and so on. I don't know what those individuals actually claim as their methodology. It doesn't invalidate their works, but a lot of it could be their own selves. It could be good still.
Right. Yeah.
But it's not necessarily channeling Jesus. So I have now honed down, and I've spelt it out in a book I wrote called God's Guides and Guardian Angels, ways that you can be sure. And one of the best of those ways, if you aren't able to enter samadhic trance, as Dr. King did, is to actually develop clairaudience, which I did myself, so that you don't just have words forming in your head. You actually hear, psychically hear, the sound of the voice.
I see.
I don't actually recommend people to try to unless they can enter samadhi, and I don't know how many people on earth can enter samadhi, but I think it's be such a tiny number that we'd be shocked. Absolutely shocked. On the physical plane. And it's easier to attain it on a higher realm than it is on the physical plane. Sorry. But I can say that. But having said that, if you can't do that, one good thing to develop is clairaudience, which is psychic hearing, because then you won't just get words forming in your head. You'll actually start to hear in your mind, it's not physical hearing, the sound behind them, the accent behind them, and you'll start to see that this is outside of you. You can tell. I mean, I then learned, after this mistake that I made, to absolutely tell the difference between an outside. One of the things I tried, actually, wrongly, I shouldn't have done, was to actually channel audibly through myself and speak. And I had a small group, and I stopped that completely then.
What was the reason for that?
Because I found it lessened, because I wasn't entering samadhi, it was lessening my will. And the amount, although it was quite good for the group, really, it wasn't, I had less and less control over the state. And that's when a mistake crept in.
I see.
So after that, I have various precautions. I'm very, very cautious. I don't now say I've got a message from anyone unless I'm absolutely sure. And if I'm not sure, I say I'm not sure. And that's the best way to do. So that's one of the methodology is crucial. That person, I'm sorry to say this, couldn't be more wrong. And at worst, it's quite dangerous.
Go on.
And at the very worst, and there could be a mental health issue creep in. If a person started to believe, and there are people with mental health issues who do believe they're channeling various or hearing the voices. Even actually what I mentioned there with clairaudience, you've got to be very, very careful too, very discriminatory, have complete control, be able to switch it on and switch it off at will, not be at the mercy of, oh, somebody wants to communicate with me and they've taken control. No, you've got to coin a phrase, take control of yourself, take back control of yourself if that happens. You don't want to allow that to happen. So there are lots of things. I mean, one could give a long... I run courses on this. Unlock Your Psychic Powers is one. I haven't done it for a few years. I'm going to do it again, actually. But I've been asked to do it again. I will. But it's a thing to be quite cautious about, psychic development. It's not blasé. Anyone who told me it was easy, I'd know they weren't reliable. I'd make that dogmatic statement. You've got your focus has got to be extremely intense. You need to know that it's outside of you, not inside of you. You need to know. If you don't know, then you can say you don't know. And by the way, there's nothing wrong with saying, look, this came to me, and I had the feeling of Jesus around me when it came to me, and I think it's beautiful, and leave it at that, without claiming I am a channel for Jesus. I mean, no one is going to say that you couldn't have the presence of Jesus around you. That could happen to anybody who had the right intent. But that's a very different thing from being a reliable, accurate channel for the Master Jesus, as I would call him, as was Dr. King, who entered this samadhic trance. Now, if you can enter samadhic trance, you have complete control over the state. You have sublimated your lower mind, which includes your subconscious mind, which is why, by the way, why Dr. King could not remember. If he took a transmission from the Master Jesus, he didn't know what had been said consciously after he came out of trance until he heard it played back to him. So you have negated those aspects of mind in order to enter that, or he did, I should say, the elevated state. And in that way, you have two things. You have accuracy, and you have the full power of the communicator.
There's another angle there, isn't there, about being able to actually contact these beings who are so much more evolved and advanced than we are. Maybe we can talk a little bit about that angle, because here's someone who's claiming to channel Jesus, but they're not doing anything.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, and the word rapport is used, gain rapport. You gain rapport with someone who's on the same wavelength as you. That's kind of generally known. And so while you are channeling a master, during the time that you're channeling them, you have to be on their wavelength. You have to have elevated your consciousness. So that's the other reason why samadhi, in the case of Dr. King, was crucial, to bring him into total rapport with a being like the Master Jesus, or indeed Mars Sector 6, who gave the 9 freedoms. The average person, and Dr. King, when he wasn't in samadhi, he wouldn't sort of sit down and just channel the Master Jesus, or claim to. I mean, he had certain powers and certain knowledge and certain abilities. He could get a trance condition, he could get a transmission which was not given in that way, a mental, you might say, a telepathic transmission. But I think that too is linked to the fact that he could enter samadhi.
I see.
As well. I also think there's a karmic aspect, which is because he'd taken all those steps and it took him 10 years of training, 8 hours a day to get there. This was a karmic manipulation, which put him in a certain position whereby he could be used.
I see.
If somebody just sort of ambles along and say, okay, I'm here, here I am, okay, let me get Jesus. First of all, you'll say, is Jesus at your beck and call? You don't have to make an appointment then.
It's quite arrogant, isn't it?
I don't wish... And you can get people who are mediums. I'm going to name one because they've named themselves. And she was very famous at one time in the New Age movement. I was on the radio with her more than once. Her name was Doreen Virtue. Was very big in America. She's now renounced it all. And she's admitted she got to the point where something would come to her and she just believed it. She wasn't, and now she's, I believe, a born-again Christian. She's given it all up. And she's not the only medium I've met who thinks like that. That anything that comes into their mind has come from a source. And used to get, I don't know whether you still do, workshops where you're taught, well, who do you want to channel?
Oh, yeah.
Count Saint Germain this weekend? And you're right, it's arrogant, but at the same time, it's very, very foolish. And if you get anyone at all, it won't be Count Saint Germain. You can guarantee it.
Right.
Not on a course, as a result of a course like that anyway.
Yeah.
Because they wouldn't want to engage or endorse such a course that talked such nonsense.
Yeah.
This is a highly skilled thing. It's something to be very careful about. I used to think, look, everyone should channel, or could channel. I don't think, well, I suppose everybody could if they really put their time to it.
Okay.
But that probably wouldn't be the most useful use of their time in most cases. Whether they should channel, no, I don't think necessarily they should. I did. It's something I wanted to do. I was lucky to be helped by Dr. King personally, and I've done it. It's not an essential requirement on the spiritual path. And so often you'll get inspired. People will get inspired. They don't know where it comes from, and it really doesn't matter. And it'll happen to me. I might be driving a car. You know, a thought comes to me, which is a very important thought. But you've still got to drive the car.
Yeah, yeah.
And I don't know. I haven't got time to try and work out, was that me? Was it a guide? Who was it? It doesn't matter if it's an important thought and it's a good one. It's fine.
One thing about that rapport, you know, comes to mind that I've heard before is people sort of ask, well, why can't they just come down to our level to attain rapport? What are the limitations to doing that?
Well, I think, look, I'm not going to say they couldn't. Let's first of all start with cosmic intelligences. I'm not going to say they couldn't. What I will say, though, is it would be a karmic intervention.
Right.
It's the same question as why don't they land in Hyde Park?
Right.
If they started using their power and energy to do that, a lot, I'm not going to even say they've never done it, but I think the person they did it with would have to have made certain types of effort, certainly some in this life and probably some in other lives, for them to do that. And they'd have to be in a certain position in what they're doing now, I believe, for them to have that kind of intervention, because that's what it would be. What is a more likely way of doing it would be down through the levels.
Oh, yeah.
So if you take the 12 blessings as an example, that's one of our great teachings in the Aetherius Society, for those who don't know, that was given in 1958, and it was stated it was given early. Dr. King wouldn't have been alive. How would it have been given? And I'm going to give an opinion here. It would have been given through the realms, in my opinion.
Okay.
I can't be sure of that. It might be another plan would have been put into place and somebody else would have been born and they could have done it. That's a possibility. But if we're just looking at the world the way it is now and was in 2008, I don't think there's anyone on the physical plane who could have taken or would have taken the 12 blessings directly in the way Dr. King did from the Master Jesus. But I do think it could have been given through the realms. Could have been given, you know, let me just throw out a name. This isn't, I'm not saying it would have been this name. Francis Bacon.
All right. Living on the higher realm.
On a higher realm.
Yeah.
I don't know what realm, but I would guess that he's on at least level 5. And the phraseology in the 12 blessings, that's why I mention him, is sort of 17th century English in places. You know, quite a lot of it is. Not all of it, but a lot of it is. You know, with phrases, maybe not this word, but he speaketh, rather than he speaks, that sort of thing. Yeah. And so it might have, you know, I'm just throwing that name out. And also he was behind the King James Bible, and he was behind the Shakespeare, the good parts of Shakespeare, the best parts, should we say. Okay. So, you know, that's the sort of person, it might have come through, and then from him, then yes, there are people who could have taken it. But it wouldn't have been nearly as good. I don't think it would have, but it wouldn't have been audible. If it had been audible, it wouldn't have been the voice of the Master Jesus.
I see, yeah.
In that case.
Of course,
so there'd been a written form. It wouldn't be as pure. It wouldn't have the same power. And because the 12 blessings also helped the world, the delivery of it, as well as
radiation energy at that time.
Yeah. But you could still have had it. It could still have been given in that way. I think myself, the book of Revelation, the end of the Bible, was given in that way. And it's almost stated in there. It was given to an angel who then gave it to St. John, by Jesus, to the angel, to St. John.
I see.
And I think that's
almost precedent.
I've never heard anyone say this about the book of Revelation in the way I'm saying it now, so they may have done, I don't know. But I think that's what that means.
Yeah.
I don't think St. John necessarily got it direct from the Master Jesus.
What I'm getting from a lot of this is that there's a real science to...
As an absolute science. It's a very difficult thing. It's so the opposite to what that questioner or person says.
And actually, I just add this in, is reinforce that is someone was they'd written into our chat online on the website, and they were saying, talking about some of the teachings, they're a bit confused, they're trying to understand, but they were like, well, I hear voice in the same way as Dr. King. I was like, whoa. Let's just talk about what that was.
No, I can go further. I've been on a radio show, on I think it was Talk Sport, actually, when they used to have a chat show on there. And somebody phoned in and I said, look, it's unfair. When I hear voices, I'm accused of being schizophrenic, and yet you're talking about hearing voices, or Dr. King hearing voices, or whatever. And there's a brilliant thing actually said once, that to the average person, the genius and the psychotic person could appear the same.
Oh, yeah.
Because to them, they're both abnormal.
Actually, that's exactly this point, isn't it?
It is really.
Yeah.
And it's not really, unfair is the wrong word, but yes, there's no doubt about it. It is a warning. A mental health warning should go with psychic development. That's why everything that I teach, and certainly everything Dr. King taught, was very careful, very safe. And if you follow those guidelines, you'll be fine. But there's loads of irresponsible teachers out there. And they aren't necessarily bad people. They believe it. They believe everybody can do whatever they want, and they can't.
Yeah.
And so the danger then is you will get someone quite severely deluded, and it could have tragic consequences.
Yeah, at a minimum, it's really muddying the waters for anyone else's search for truth, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, the confusion, the misinformation, and just the way that it makes it difficult to discern between who's giving a real message, like in the example Dr. King, and someone who's just hearing voices.
And that's why I was so lucky with Dr. King, that he did this training. I mean, and yeah. I used to say, look, I don't know of anyone else who's done it. I'm going to go further than that now and say no one else has done it, because I've been trying to find someone in the West who did 8 hours of yoga a day for 10 years, as well as a job. And that brings, he was practical about money. He didn't have his own income. He had to earn it as well as doing that. He did nothing. That was his focus, virtually his entire focus. And that's completely unique, completely unheard of. And that's why he could enter Samadhi. I know from my little experience that, following this particular path for over 50 years and being full-time doing it, working full-time doing it, on a very limited salary. I mean, my salary when I started was £12 a week. I did have accommodation and certain allowances, but it's built up since then. Yeah. I'm glad to say. Yeah. But, for 44 years, I think it is, I've done this, and it's taken me till this year that we're in now to even taste Samadhi. I didn't do what Dr. King did, of course. I was on the path of service as he taught, King Yoga, you might call it, the path of the Aetherius Society, sure. The path of the 9 freedoms, as a matter of fact. Yeah. It's taken me this long to taste it, but the one thing you do know when you do, you know it's real. You know it. It's not like you think it, feel it, pretty darn certain. I mean, that's one difference I've noticed. When I channel, sometimes I'll get a name that I've never heard of. It might be quite an obscure name. And when I look them up after I've got the message, and I find, yes, that person did exist, and they lived in the 13th century or whatever it might be, and they were so-and-so, and this and that and the other, it all fits. I'm kind of, I won't say relieved, but I'm very pleased. It's nice. Yeah. It's kind of, it gives you sort of, okay, good. And you always get that, I think, with a genuine, in one way or another. But when you go beyond that, you start to go into the samadhic state, you don't really need that, because then you really know. And so, again, you can have people who think they know, but they don't. So one has to discriminate and one has to judge. But one way to judge is that anyone who says it's as easy and anyone can do it and you just stop thinking and it happens, no. No. You have to train for it over a long period. It's very intense. At the very minimum, you've got to have superb concentration while you're doing it, as the absolute minimum. On top of that, you'll have some psychic powers of one kind or another as a minimum. Yeah,
I think these are great yardsticks for people to apply. And I think a great note to end it on there, really painting in the distinction between just hearing voices and the real science of applying mediumship.
Yeah, and just give a warning here and now. Anyone who's just hearing voices, don't assume you're getting messages. And if you're really concerned, seek help if you really don't know what's going on.
Well, thank you very much, Richard, for the show today.
Thank you.